Hello, and welcome to Life and DNA with Amanda Renee. I'm Amanda. If you have watched or listened to my episodes from back in December, you know that I had taken some time off and was kind of praying about where my podcast was going to go, where the channel was going to go. And I'm back finally. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of stick more with the ancestry side, kind of like what I'm reading, what I'm listening to, things like that. Kind of lighter topics than some of the things I was talking about before. Um, so yeah, that's what I'll be doing. Um, Today I wanted to talk about some ancestry stuff that I discovered recently. One of the reasons I love doing the podcast, even though I know there's only a handful of people that listen or watch it. I like to talk about ancestry and I like to talk about the things I've discovered. And I don't really have anybody in my life that really likes to talk about it with me or even gives a crap about what I'm saying. So, this way on the podcast, I at least get to talk about it. And if somebody listens and gets something out of it, awesome. If they don't, okay, it's out there, and I at least got to talk about what I wanted to talk about. So that's kind of how I look at this. And as a stay-home homeschool mom, I don't get a lot of adult conversation time. Um, on the weekends, I'm teaching preschoolers. So again, not much adult conversation. I talk to my husband a little bit in the evening, but it's typically not like, big, long, drawn out conversations or anything. It's just chit chatting about the day or whatever's going on in our lives. So I don't really get to just talk. I'm a woman and we want to use our words. And so this podcast kind of gives me that. But yeah, I want to stay on kind of more general topics, lighter topics. So anyway, a couple weeks ago, one of my brothers had texted me with a question about our family history. He is a big World War II buff, and he had heard somehow that they thought we had a relative that died fighting in World War II. And he had a couple of names for me. He had been talking to my mom, and she or he had been talking to one of my aunts and possibly another relative. And so they had a little bit of information. Some of it was conflicting information because they couldn't remember exactly who and how. And so I did some digging for a couple of days, and that was a lot of fun. So I would text my brother. We would text each other back and forth. I'd show him what I found. There was a relative that had some like newspaper clippings or notes written down, and so that would kind of give me a general idea of kind of where to go. He had given me, what was funny was he had given me the name of a cousin. I think he's like my mom's first cousin once removed, something like that. And they said his name was Clell. And so I was like, okay. Looked for a Clell. And there was one. But his name was Clell Jr. And his father's name, my relative's name was Clyde. So I'm like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I dug into him a little bit. He did fight in World War II, but he did not die in World War II. He was adopted, and some of the paperwork I found was very confusing. Some of the things even on the internet were confusing. And they had his mother's maiden name as Reese, which is what my family's surname in this instance was. And so I did a little more digging. He sent me something else from them. I can't remember what it was. And I will tell you, and I push this so much if you ever listen to anything I have to say about digging into your family history. Use newspapers.com. I have found more helpful information on there than I even have on Ancestry. It's amazing. And they add new newspapers all the time. So anyway, I Googled him. I did some research on him on the newspapers and then found out, sorry, found out that he was in fact adopted. His mother was not related to us. Um, and his story was actually very tragic, awful. And I ended up, you have to watch how you word things when you're trying to find specific things in the newspapers. They worded things very different back in the day. We're talking, early 1900s when all of this happened. And they worded things a little different. So I was typing in one thing and not getting really any results. And also, I had his last name, his birth last name, misspelled differently than the newspaper spelled it. The documents on Ancestry had one spelling, and the newspapers had a different one. And so when I changed the wording on what I was looking for, I found it. His parents had died, and it was a murder-suicide. It was really creepy. His dad shot his mom and then shot himself. And there were 9 kids. The oldest one is the one that found them, ran out of the house, and got a neighbor to call the police. And all of that is in the newspaper article. It was really, really sad. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my microphone. There we go. Sorry, my microphone was acting up. Anyway, so his parents were gone. There were 9 kids. And from the research I did a little bit on some of them, because thankfully between newspapers.com and Ancestry, I found, I wanted a little more information on the father since he had done that. I found a distant relative that had a family tree and listed where all the kids went. Every kid went to a different family. It was tragic. Like, none of them got to stay together, which broke my heart because they were, I think, age 12 to a baby. My relative, I believe he was the one that adopted our family, was 3 when it happened. So it was just really, really tragic. And one of the newspapers said that it was money troubles and that there was a stack of bills in the house. And you're talking during the time like right before the Great Depression. So economy wasn't great. They had all those kids. And so, yeah, all of that was tragic yet interesting to find out. I never knew anything like that had happened to anybody in our family. I personally never met this cousin. I think my mom said that she had. She remembers going into her aunt and uncle's house, and the reason she thought he was the one that died in war was because they were never allowed to go in his room. Like, they treated it almost like, like people do when someone passes away. They didn't change anything in it, and they wouldn't let anyone in it. So she assumed he was the one that passed away, but he didn't. He did go fight. I did find some things. He was honorably discharged, but I did find where he went AWOL for several days, and I'm not really sure what the story is with all of that. I couldn't find much information about that. But he did come back, and then I believe had a family of his own. And then I got to looking into another family. One of Clyde's sisters had a son, and he did die in World War II. His name was Joseph, I believe. And it was really sad with him too. They had a newspaper article a local newspaper had done an interview with his mother, I believe, and she had said I think he died in March, and the previous November or December, he had been home on leave with a bunch of the other boys, and they had put on a big party or dance or something for all of them at a community building. And while he was there, he had told somebody that he wasn't coming back. Like, he knew he wasn't coming back. And the sad thing was, he had been a really sickly kid all his life. He didn't even get to graduate with his class. And because of how sickly he was, he couldn't play sports. He couldn't play sports. He couldn't graduate. He graduated later. But then when he did, and the war came on, and he had graduated, he went to take the test, and he was determined to pass it. He wanted to go and fight with his friends. He wanted to go and fight for his country and get to do something that mattered. And he passed the test. I don't know how, because if he was that sickly, I don't know how he passed, but he did, and went to fight. He had to be sent to the Philippines part of the war, and this will show you how sad public school education is sometimes. I didn't even realize that we fought in the Philippines during World War II until I was teaching my son the other day in history, and his history talked about it. I do not remember ever learning that. We had just read that before I did all this digging, so it was interesting to put those pieces together. And so there was this one, my brother went and researched which battle it was and things like that. They had been trying to take this one, to kind of surround this one area and move forward. And his group was the ones at the forefront trying to make progress. And they had a shootout with some of the Japanese, and they had shot this guy, and it was my relative that went and to see if he was really dead. He wasn't, and he shot him in the head, and he died instantly. So it was a tragic story, but it was kind of cool to learn that we had a war hero in the family. His family got, a medal for his bravery, for all of that. And it was nice to have kind of a personal tie to that with that side of the family. I've already known my great-grandfather on my dad's side fought in World War II. He came back not the same ever. Whatever it was that they used to, the gas that they used to throw into the trenches, because he was fighting in France, it messed with him, and it messed with his health for the rest of his life. My grandma did not have a good relationship with him. She wouldn't even hardly talk about him, because she didn't like, how he treated her mom and her sisters. And I never got to meet him. He passed away before I was born. But he did fight over there and fight for his country. And so it's sad that all those men went over there and then had to come back different, and their families, didn't get to know who they were before all of that. It's just sad to me. But so anyway, it's always fun, not always to hear the sad stories, but it's fun to get to find those personal ties to history. I like getting to tell my kids that it helps when you're learning history, and you can tie something in to make it personal and make it more interesting. And I love that. I love that I do the research and get to tell them about that. Now, sometimes they don't care. But other times it's exciting because it's like, oh, okay. So I got to tell my son, remember when we learned about World War II and the island hopping, and they were fighting over in the Philippines, and we actually had a family member that got killed in one of those skirmishes. And so that was interesting and fun to get to tell him about. So yeah, that's just been kind of the ancestry update that I have right now. I haven't had a ton of time to do things with it. My mother's stepsister found, and I do think I talked about this in December, found a brother she didn't know she had through DNA. And I just saw right before I hopped on here and was trying to get my facts straight that he messaged me and is wondering if I've done any research on their side. I have not yet because it wasn't a blood connection for me. It was her stepfather. So I might have to do a little digging into that so I can help them and see what I can find. But yeah, that's what I've been doing as far as that goes. I will have an episode about like what I'm reading and what I'm listening to probably next week. So I hope you come back and listen to that. But that's all I have for now. And I will talk to you later. Bye.